I'm gonna show some monotype techniques. It's a lot of fun to do. I do a lot of painting. Printmaking is something I do probably half the time, painting half the time. I do lithography and monotype work and intaglio work. But this is a lot of fun just to loosen up and just have fun. So this particular technique, I have three different the primary colors set out here. And I base my color palette on natural environments. A lot of people don't know where to start when they do artwork, and I always encourage people to tap into your interests. So maybe you like to do go for walks, maybe you like to read, maybe you like watching people. There's so many different ways you can get inspiration. For me, I like natural environments, so I'm basing my imagery and palette on pictures that I take out in nature. So what I like to do is just kind of start, and there is no rules with monotype, which is kind of fun too. You can paint, use different tools. I've got some makeup sponges here. You can just smudge it on. I'm working on a piece of plexiglass, and the fun thing about it is you can see through it. So this smudgy part will print and it'll be nice and blurry. So you just mix your colors, make some marks. And this is a real freeing kind of technique. Monotype is, the word monotype is exactly what it is. It's one type of print. So it's one-off prints. The difference between monotype and mono printing is a mono print, you have a matrix or like a substrate that you can take like many prints off of, but the prints are different in that you can go in and change them. Monotype printing this is the only print you'll have, which is really unique. So once I show you how to print it, you'll see what comes of it here. So I'm just adding different types of strokes, brush strokes. I'm using a brush. You can use different sizes of brushes. The ink I'm using is oil-based lithography ink. And I adapt it to make it looser. So it's nice to have a bit of you don't want it too stiff, the ink too thick. When I say stiff, it means thick. Because you want it to kind of move around on the plate quite nice. And I'm using it like a painter palette. This is oil-based ink, but you can use, I've been using open acrylic, which is really nice. It's a slow drying acrylic. And that's what this piece was done with. The most of the color in this is done with the open acrylic. And it gives a nice soft feel. So you can be as detailed with this as you want. You can use rollers, which are fun to use. So when you use a roller, you can roll right over it. It makes a mark, but what it picks up on the roller, and it transfers back onto the plate. So that's what happened here, and you can use that as mark making. So my approach to monotype is very reactive. So I use my tools, and whatever the tools do, I just go with it. And that's part of the fun. So I got a first layer on here. Now I can keep going, with putting ink on, but kind of some of the fun mark making with the tools is you can take the ink off. So you can scrape back in with a scraper and get some dramatic marks. So this is quite an abstract approach right now because I'm just playing with the textures. I'm mixing the colors. As you can see, there's a lot of earthy colors, greens and blues and browns. You can use your tool in different ways. Think about how you can use your tools. This is quite a wide tool, and you can scrape back and get a nice wide swath, reducing the ink. But if you turn it on its side, it makes some nice marks too. So think about your tools. Like maybe, what would the handle do? Maybe you use the handle of your tools. Like even the little handle of this little brush makes small little marks. So you can use that as a detail. So that's something to keep in mind too. And then you can go back with different brush strokes. And you just keep building. Now, one thing to keep in mind, because we're going to use the press behind me here, there's pressure with the press. So you put it through and the barrel presses the ink down or the paper down into the ink. If you put thick ink, you'll have to think about, well, that pressure is going to push that ink. Maybe that's a mark you want, and that's where the fun is. Like you can experiment even with making marks with the ink in the way the press works. So this is a pretty thick stroke here. The paint is, or the ink is going on quite thick. I might thin it out a little bit because I will have that push of ink when it goes through the roller. The marks I'm making, because I spent a lot of time in natural environments, I find when I work just from my brain and I don't have a picture in front of me I'm copying or still life work, the marks I tend to make tend to be ones that I like based on natural environments. So maybe this could be like seaweed or like flora and fauna out by a river. It's just the way my artwork has evolved, and that will happen too when you just start making work and showing up at the press or showing up with your inking table. It just naturally happens, and that's a lot of fun when you start seeing, hey, I did this before. Okay. So the rollers, when you roll, you can roll straight up, like I said, but it's a tool. Think about how you can use this tool. Smudge it across. When it glides across the plate, it makes some great marks and some blurred sections. The human eye likes variety, so the more variety of mark making you can do with Monotype, the more interest the piece will have. So I'm not taking it right to the edge. You can, and print right to the edge. You can tape it off and have a nice clean edge. There's different approaches to this. For today, I'm just doing this, and then I'll probably tear my paper. So this one I did that. I'll probably tear my paper right to the edge, so the image will go right to the edge. And this relieves the stress of dealing with clean borders. If you know anything about printmaking, printmakers like their clean borders, and you can do that with this, but I'm not showing that technique. I'm just showing how to put the ink on the plexi right now and printing. I think I need a little more red in here. And the beauty of Monotype printing too is I can print a layer, and if I feel I'm not happy with that, I can print over it again. You can add and add and add to it. When you're working with oil, it's nice to leave it dry a little bit in between, like even a couple days, so that when you do put it through the press, you don't have paper lifting. It's important that your ink is dry between layers, but you can certainly add layers to it. So I'm gonna just add a few more small marks here. Some different, and some different marks, or variety is fun. If you're messy with it, maybe you want to wear gloves. I'm not wearing gloves right now, but you can, just to keep things a little cleaner. Let's see here. So another thing to do when you're working with the plexi, because it's see-through, it's nice to lift it up and see through it. And you can kind of see where there's negative space or there's no ink. That will be the color of your paper. So white, your white paper. Something to keep in mind with any artwork that you do in color theory is white tends to read closer to the viewer. So you'll see when I print, or even here, the white marks tend to come forward. And when you're painting or working with your prints or image work, it's something to keep in mind, that where is that white gonna land. Okay, I'm thinking this is at a stage where I'd like to print it now. The next part to this is preparing your paper to print. And what I like to do is soak it, the paper a little bit. I use a rag paper, which soaks really nice. It takes the water really nice. The reason you want to soak it is when you go to print the ink onto the paper, the ink sits really nice on the surface, a little bit nicer than if you print dry. You can print dry paper with this. It just looks a little different. So this step is kind of optional, but I really do like the way the ink sits on the paper, and it's really vibrant. The ink becomes really vibrant. You'll see that in the next step. All right, so this is the printing step. What we do now is we put this on the press, and we put our paper down. This is the soaked paper, and I like to use the smooth side. The rough side is the back side, but you can do whatever you want. There is no rules to monotype printing. And then there's no registration with this. Registration is when you mark out exactly where you put your plate and exactly where you put your paper. And that can get quite technical, but because this is really free approach to printing, I just lay my paper right down. I just make sure that the plate is fully covered with paper. If it's not, then you can put a piece of newsprint down that will catch all the ink. That's important because you want to kind of protect all your sizing catcher and your blankets. So you put down the sizing catcher, just like a piece of felt, and then you put down your blankets. And all of this helps the plate just move through the press. If you think about it, there's a lot of friction happening here too, but it helps everything stay in place and adds a little cushion between the plate and the paper and the barrel, the metal barrel here. So this is all set up, and now we just push it through, roll it through, and you can feel it once the plate hits underneath the blankets. You can feel the plate catch, and that's engaged. And if you can, pull it slow and try to keep your blankets straight. It's a bit of multitasking, which is all right. It'll make a bit of a clunk when it's at the end. And you want to set up your press so that it's tight, but it's not too tight, and that takes some time, but it's good to be careful of that. So the plate has gone through. You heard it kind of clunk a little bit. And now we're ready to see what it looks like. All right, so this is the reveal. We'll see how it printed. So we take the newsprint off. You see on the newsprint here that the ink came through the paper. That's why newsprint is so important to save your blankets. And then we're gonna just pull it off and see what happened. It took a lot of the ink. You see that? And there's the print. So this is the print that came off this is the first layer. And I'm noticing that a lot of the smaller marks that I reduced got squished. So I lost some of that. So what I can do is make some decisions as to how I can add to this. I do like the little white, the little bit of white that's in here. But now I'm thinking I might want to add some darker tones to this and bring in some darker tones. And I'm going to show you a technique called trace monotype. And that'll just add another layer to this. So this is the print that came off, and I'm going to add some darker passages through here, which means we need to work our palette. I have painting background, so I like to mix my colors quite a bit. So I use primaries a lot to get all my secondary colors and to get my blacks as well, my darker colors. So that's what I'm going to do right now. And I'm just going to use just a mixing palette, pull out some of my color here from my main palette, and just mix to get a darker color. And it might lean towards a certain color. So this is leaning towards green, and it's because I've got a lot of blue and yellow in it. So if I want it to be more brown, I will add a little bit of red. And when I teach classes, I get into a little bit of color theory, because I think it's important when you're using color that you understand theory behind it. It's not just kind of a whim. There is theory, and it's important to know a little bit of that. So right now I'm just making what I want to achieve with this is a darker value of color than what I have here. I think I might put a little more blue in this. And again, you're working with a fairly loose viscosity ink, so it's not sticky. It moves around on your palette. You can do a peak if it kind of comes up a little bit, like it peaks a little bit, but then it falls back down. It's a nice consistency. Trick with this too is that you make sure you mix enough ink, and because it's hard to kind of go back and match that if you really like that color. So always mix a little bit more than what you need. And you can store this ink. So, but I'm a big advocate for using your ink in different ways. I'm going to show you how I use all of this. This surface will become a print surface. I'll show you that. So that you're not wasting any of your ink. And then, like I say, if you absolutely don't use it, you can store it. And all I do is simple. I just wrap it up in a little bit of tin foil, little packages of tin foil. So tin foil is a nice tool to have. All right, so this is a nice deep forest green, I guess, if I have to put a label on it. Beautiful, beautiful dark green. So what I'm gonna do is, this is the the plate I was using before that we did that I did the print on. And there's a bit of a ghost print on here. If I were to print this, I'd get a very light print of this. It's still considered a monotype, a one print. This is the only print you'll have. But you can take a ghost print and it'll be really light. And you can layer that as well. But for this, what I'm going to do is put a full coverage, almost a full coverage of ink on here. And just roll out a little bit of ink on here. You need to have the right amount of ink when you're doing this. When I do lithography work, this is something that's important with lithographers. You have the right amount of ink, and there's a sound to it. So it'll sound, you kind of want that hiss, that little bit of hissing sound. I have a squeaky roller too, but that's fine. But you can kind of hear that hissing. And the texture is, it's kind of like the white of an orange peel when you peel off an orange, which is kind of an interesting thing to look at. It's kind of your cue. Yeah, I have enough ink on here. For monotype work, it really doesn't matter, but where you will see it if you have too much is your roller will slide. And of course I have just the right amount of ink, so it's not gonna slide, but you don't want it to slide around. You want a nice coverage here. And it doesn't have to be perfect for this approach here. So what we're gonna do is some trace monotype work, and I'll explain once we get going here what that is. I like to pull out a little more ink. There's that hissing sound. So you know that it's even, and I don't quite have an even okay. And you don't have to cover the whole thing because this technique isn't you're not printing the whole plate. You're just printing some of it. And I'll show you here. Let's do this. So this is a relatively even coverage. Okay. So now what you do is, because this is quite abstract, I don't even, right at this point, don't even know if this is up or down. You can make that decision now or right from the beginning when you were painting. That's up to you. So what I'm going to do now is put this right down on my palette, like this. And whatever I touch, the ink will pick up. So I like to use, you can use a pencil, you can use the end of a brush. A pen or pencil is nice because then you can see where you're drawing on the back side. So I'm thinking I'm going to want to have some actual leaf shapes in this because I am using the natural environment as inspiration. So I'm just going to draw some leaves, and if you can imagine too, like you can use different tools with this too. And I'm going to pick this up and you'll see there's the leaves sitting on the surface in a darker color, and it creates this, I call it noise. So when you and you can lay this down like multiple times, doesn't matter where, but the noise that I was talking about is kind of nice. Maybe you just use your finger and you rub. We'll see what that does. That's a mark. So you see that darker passage? That was from rubbing just my finger on it. So you can really push and pull the space with the different marks with trace monotype. This is, I don't know, a common approach, one color, and doing like a line drawing on top. But I like to get quite painterly. So maybe I'll do some scribbles. I'm gonna put some more leaves. So I'm hoping at the end of it that it'll kind of look like the leaves are blowing in the wind a little bit. I do quite a bit of drawing here. You could go off of an actual photo if you wanted. I'm just kind of approaching it quite abstractly and reactively, like whatever happens. But this approach could be a little intimidating, so you might want to actually use a photograph to go off of, or go off of a still life. So let's see what that did. So there's some darker passages there. You don't really see the leaf, and that's okay. This is just kind of an idea, just a little more layers help with the variety, like I was talking about before. The human eye likes variety. So this is just another mark on top of the marks that are already there. And you can keep going and going, and you can change your color and do it in a different color. I did this pretty quickly after the first layer. Sometimes you want to leave, depending on the technique, I wouldn't put this print through the press again, only because you might start peeling off some of the paper. It's a good idea to let it dry if you're going to put the print through multiple times through the press. But because this is such a delicate procedure, technique, because this is such a delicate technique, you can do it right away. Yeah, so I'm kind of happy with that. This is another press that Snap has that's really nice for monotype work. It's called an offset press. The reason it's called an offset press, and I'll demonstrate it in a second here, is the work that you do on the plate offsets onto a blanket or a roller, and then it prints onto your paper. And it's unique in that when you do text work, it reads right instead of flipped and reading backwards, which when you don't use an offset technique, that's what happens to text. So that's what I like about this press. It's very unique to print studios, fine art print studios. Not many of them have an offset press, mostly because of the sheer size. It's a big press. Offset presses are used commercially to do comic books, newspapers. This is a hand cranked one, which is really nice, and ones used commercially are usually electric and large. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to you can do a painting. I call it painting because my style is quite painterly. But you create marks on your surface. And because it's monotype, I'm very reactive with my work because it's only one print. I don't have to make multiple prints that look the same. So basically what I'm going to do is try and work on a surface that is about the size of my paper. If it goes over the size, that doesn't matter. It just prints over the size, and you'll see that in a second. So I'm just going to roll out some ink to make some marks. And again, this is just free form working. Use your tool to your advantage. So a roller rolls in swaths, but you can also drag it to blur it however you want. You can use a brush. You can mix your ink to get different colors on a palette like I have here, or you can mix it right on your surface. So you spend some time creating an image. And again, monotype can be, you can just react to what is there, but you can also approach it quite traditionally, or you can copy a photo, use a photo as a reference and that you've taken, and and create from that. And this you can take as long as you want. I'm using oil-based ink, lithography ink. I like to use oil-based for this because the dry time is longer. So this won't dry, like I can take as long as I want to create an image, and the ink won't dry, which is really nice. So you can use different tools as a popsicle stick, Q-tips, a sponge brush, makeup brushes, traditional brushes, rollers, just make your marks. But the fun thing about this is you can put text into it. So I'm just gonna write the word hello with an exclamation mark here and there. And you'll see how when you print it, the text will be right facing. So something you can also do with Monotype is do some masking. And the way I do masking is you can use just simple newspaper, you can use tape, but newsprint is nice. And what you can do is just lay it in certain spots, and what will happen is that area won't print. So it just adds a little bit to the piece. So maybe that's all I need. It doesn't have to be much. So now we're gonna print this. And we're gonna engage the press, and I'll show you how all that works. So you start at this end and you crank it. Right now, this is called the blanket, and it's up. It's not engaged. When you roll it over, it will go over the inked patch there, my image, but it's not gonna pick anything up right now until you get to the end here, and you'll see the blank engaged. Now it comes back and it will pick up the ink. The ink offsets onto the blanket, and you keep rolling. And now, because this is Monotype, it doesn't matter where I place this. I can place it anywhere, and it'll print. So I don't have to be careful to watch the registration. And it prints onto the surface. Now the blanket is disengaged, or it lifts up, and I have a print. So this is the prints you can do here in the shop, and of course this is just a small sampling of what can be done here. You can also print at home, and I'm going to be showing you some different techniques that my son and I are going to go do together, and we'll have fun doing that too. Welcome to my home. We're going to do some Monotype work here at the dining room table. We, being my son Corwin's, going to help us out.
Hello.
And we went to the garden and collected some leaves, different sizes, different shapes. And what we're going to do with these is ink them up and do some prints of them. Open acrylic is nice because the drying time is really slow, so it allows you to roll up and leave the paint on the palette without it drying, which is nice to work with. If you've got regular acrylic, you can use a retarder that will slow the time. See how it's going on there? You gotta put quite a bit on. There we go. Okay. Inked this, and now we're gonna put the paper on top. And then we have some newsprint that we put on top of that. And then you can use that, or you can use it if you don't have special tools like this. You can use a wooden spoon.
Or a spatula.
Spatula, yeah, anything that's hard enough to push down. You wanna hold it with your hand.
Can I use this?
Sure, try it. Gotta make sure you're holding hard. All right, that's probably good. I'm gonna peel it back. I'm gonna lift it up and see what you got. Ooh, look at that. That's beautiful. Corwin helped us demonstrate working with open acrylic. So I'm going to show you how to use oil. This is just all oil-based, and if you roll it out thin and use it on your paper in a thin layer, it won't, the oil won't get absorbed too deep into the surface of the paper. So oil can be used too. This is it's a rubber roller so that you can clean it up easier. It's a really handy tool to use. Now I'm going to use a bigger leaf and just roll, and I'm going to work with the negative space on the outside. And I'm going to do two pieces. I'm going to work with two prints kind of at the same time. And it's okay if you don't, you hear it crunching. It's okay if you don't have it flat. It will be flat when you go to print it. But I like all this kind of noise around the outside edge, so I'm going to use that in one of the prints. All right, so I'm going to print that negative space first. And you can lay it anywhere you want. So I'll put it down in that corner. And then you want some newsprint, same way we did before, lay your newsprint. What that does is it just keeps everything clean. And then I'm gonna use the Baron because I have it here. I like using it. So this is just gonna print that negative space around that leaf. Just a little bit of texture there, and you can keep adding. And now I'm going to print this leaf in a positive. The paper I'm using is Somerset. I like to use a smoother paper. BFK Reeves would be fine too. There is a bit of a texture to one side and a smoother surface on the other side. So I kind of like to use a little bit of the texture side because it does give a bit of interest. So I'm just going to lay my leaf down. I'm going to just offset it a little bit. You want your paper, newsprint again. Print it in a stand to get some good pressure on it. All right, let's see what we have. That turned out quite nice. So I want to move on to the next layers. This print has a little bit of the yellow in the background, and this print has the yellow leaf. I want to add a second color, but I'm going to start blending the colors, and I haven't cleaned my roller. So I'm just going to pull out a little bit of the blue. I'm going to add some of this blue onto this leaf. And all this in the negative space is going to end up on this print or this print. I'm not sure yet. You don't have to make these decisions, plan that out. You can go make decisions as you go along. This will probably turn out a little more blue. It's not mixing quite as how I expected it, but that's okay. I like all these blue marks in the negative space there. I'll be quite subtle on this again. So I'm just gonna lay it down kind of the way it was before. Lay down the newsprint again, and I'm not gonna stand there, I just want it a subtle bit of blue on that background. Let's see how that turned out. Yeah, just adding subtle layers to it. Okay, now I'm going to print this one, and I'm going to print it in this negative space here. Actually, you know what? I'm going to add another color just because. Just because I want it a little different. I have not cleaned my roller again, so it'll just keep mixing the colors. You certainly can clean in between, and I just put a slight roll on this one, and I'm cleaning around this edge because I don't want that around the edge of it. And I'm going to put this one in this color in the negative space of this one here. And I just eyeball it. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then always remember your newsprint. It just keeps your baron clean and it keeps your print clean. But I can put a little weight into it. You want to make sure that your leaf doesn't shift because you'll get a double print. Okay, we'll see how that worked. Oh, that's great. So all those colors together started to become a gray color, which is a lovely, lovely color. So I rolled out a thin layer of paint on my plexi with my roller, and I'm going to now lay a plant on top of it. Just in an interesting spot. And I'm going to print that. What will happen is it will leave a negative space. So you kind of have to plan it a little bit where you're going to lay that negative space. You can lay out, you can roll out a large patch and do this, lay a bunch of plants on top, and then put your whole paper down. But I'm choosing just to do a little section because I really like this leaf, but I do want some more variety in here. So I'm just going to lay that down. And I'm going to print this. And try not to move it too much. So I've left a large negative space around that plant. Now what I'm going to do is print the plant inside that space. So now I'm just going to peel this off here. And you'll have that paint on that side. And take a look. I might want to put a little more on it. There's probably not enough there. So I can ink it again. I just like how delicate this looks. Use this ink. Okay, and now I'm going to clean up my plexi. Okay, now I'm gonna lay this down on here. Make sure as much as the ink side of the plant is down. It's very delicate and fragile, so and twists and turns, so you might not get it perfect, and that's okay. You just kind of want it as much in that negative space as possible. We'll try that. You want your newsprint again. And you want your Baron. It's got some stringy texture to it, all that stringy texture. I like the variety of line and texture, so we're just gonna keep layering and layering. Here are the finished pieces. You can keep layering and layering with all these techniques. It's kind of fun to do, but you don't have to stay home to do monotype. This isn't a home studio, but this is where I feel most at home, is out here in natural environments. And I wanted to show you a monotype technique that I love doing in my sketchbook when I'm out and about in nature. It's kind of a field study book, and I've got a drawing started here already, just using watercolor pencil. And I did a drawing of this scene in front of us. And now all I'm going to do is capture the reflection. And it's really fun to do with the watercolor pencil. So all you do is you do your drawing on one side, and then you wet the page, the opposite page, with this is a watercolor or a water brush. So I get it quite wet. I don't know if you can see how wet it is. And then you squish it together. Good press. You use your hands for the pressure. And you open it up. I've done quite a few of them. And we'll see what happened. So that's the beginning, and then you can layer and layer. There are many different ways to approach monotype. I have shown you just a few. I hope you can take these tips and create your own work, and thank you for watching.